I want to see pictures of your mom when she looked like Yvette. That's what I want to see.
I have them.
You want to see his mom dressed as a French maid with her titties out?
Yes, I do.
My mom was a real smoke show in the 70s. I'll send you some photos.
Oh, fucking pass those on.
Remember when we first met John McClane? Argyle picked him up from the plane and took him down the Nakatomi Tower at the Christmas party. And the terrorists were overzealous, but it was sweet when they killed Ellis. And with a little help from Alan, John McClane kicked ass.
Welcome back to Shat the Movies, the podcast where we answer the question, were the movies we loved growing up really that good? Have you ever caught yourself thinking, why don't they make movies like they used to? Can you still remember spending your Friday night searching for the perfect movie rental at Blockbuster Video? Do you even remember what Blockbuster Video was? If you answer yes to this is the podcast for you, I'm one of your 3 co-hosts, Roger Roper. And alongside me are my 2 co-hosts, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
And Gene Wadsworth Lyons.
I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife.
And each week, we take a look back in time and decide if our favorite films still hold up. Each week, the audience selects from 6 movie choices that we then break out our waste car VHS tape rewinders to watch the movie that tallied the highest number of votes. At the end of the podcast, the 3 of us will provide you, the audience, with a number of wipes each movie would take to get off your butts. That being said, you can also check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. Westworld, I guess by the time of this release, it'll be like the first week, right? It'll be the week right after the first episode. So if you are looking for a podcast that covers Westworld, go to shatontv.com, search for Westworld, and follow along with myself, Gene, Big D. We have Ashley Schlafly joining us, as well as the King Bee. So 3 times a week, that's what we're going to be doing. But in order to pay the bills, we have people that send in their hard-earned dollars, Big D.
That they do. And this week we had a unique situation that's never popped up before. Usually the process is you contact us, you tell us what movie you want to do. And as long as it's something that's fairly popular, well-known, isn't just a complete shit show, we'll do it. But 2 people actually commissioned the movie and paid within like a day of each other. So I wasn't able to tell the second one, hey, it's been commissioned. So this is a dual commission. The first person who commissioned it was John S., and then right after that was Miguel F. They got together. They said we can both do it and share the commission. So they've both written in why they chose to commission the 1985 2-hour board game commercial, Clue.
And anytime someone sends in their emails, we have Gene Lyons do the reading of those emails.
Thank you, Raj. The first one comes from John in no particular order. And he says, growing up, we had 2 movies at home, Clue and The Goonies. My sister and I watched this movie so many times growing up that when I rewatched for the first time in at least a decade recently, I could still recite every line, and I still love every one of them. This movie is nothing short of brilliant. Every performance is great, and the set design is amazing. The ground floor is laid out just like the board game, with the rooms in the correct relative position. This movie is exactly what it aims to be and should be in the half a wipe to 1.5 wipe range. And that comes from John. Now, Miguel wrote in, and he said, hey guys, my sister Yanali put me onto your show, and I really like it. You guys are really thorough, and so far, I agree with most of what you say on your podcast. I usually listen to you at work, and it really helps my day, so thank you. We've been watching the movie Clue since we were kids. We grew up in the ghetto, so watching TV helped me stay out of trouble and also helped me bond with my younger sister. Now, as adults, we watch it anytime we get together since I live in New Jersey and my sister lives in Florida. We love the movie so much that I can safely say we've memorized about 40% of the lines in the movie. I don't know how I ended up liking this movie so much since I didn't know about the game until after I saw the movie, and I also have no relation to a 1950s blackmailing murdering butler, but I think it might be the great cast. Christopher Lloyd is one of my favorite actors since he was also Doc from Back to the Future. Tim Curry is awesome, and I still enjoy watching Michael McKean on Better Call Saul. We got together for the holidays, and I realized we wanted to have you guys review our favorite movie, and don't worry, I'll be fine if you guys rip it apart because I understand it's an acquired taste. Thank you so much in advance. You guys are amazing. And that comes from Miguel.
Well, Clue is a 1985 American ensemble black comedy mystery film based on the board game of the same name. The film was directed by Jonathan Lynn, who collaborated on the script with John Landis, and stars Eileen Brennan, Tim Curry, Madeline Kahn, Christopher Lloyd, Michael McKean, Martin Mull, and Lesley Ann Warren. In keeping with the nature of the board game, the theatrical release included 3 possible endings, with different theaters receiving one of the 3 endings. In the film's home video release, all 3 endings were included, and the film initially received mixed reviews and unfortunately did poorly at the box office, grossing just $14.6 million in the United States against a budget of $15 million. However, later on, it developed a considerable cult following, and in January of 2018, Fox announced Ryan Reynolds, who had established a 3-year first-look deal with the studio, would star in a live-action remake with Rhett Reese and Paul Wernick, writers for the Reynolds-led Deadpool, its sequel, and Life, as scriptwriters. In September of 2019, The Wrap reported that Jason Bateman was in talks to direct the film, but by February 2020, Bateman was no longer attached to it, and instead, James Bobin had been in talks with 20th Century Fox for directing the film. Before we dive into our review, we always ask the question, where were you? What are your first memories of this movie? We'll start with you, Big D.
So as you guys talk about it, and as I hear the letters from Miguel and John, I've seen the common thread of the people who like this movie. You've seen it multiple times. You've seen it 30 times. You can, just memorize all the lines. It's so great. Unfortunately for me, this was the first time I'd ever sat down and watched the movie. And even though it was later at night, I was a bit tired. I'm taking that into account. I do not believe that will be the result of me being tired. I just think this is a movie that you need to watch multiple times to have a growing enjoyment of it. So yesterday, it was the first time I'd ever watched this. And now I wish that I could forget watching it. That might change on my 50th viewing, but this was the first time and probably only time I will ever watch this.
I'd like to propose that Big D have the opportunity in like sort of a James Delos sort of situation where we could put him in a cell. He could watch this 11,000 times. And then at any point, Big D, in the future, when you decide that you love this movie, you can come back and change your score. We won't hold it against you.
I just want to come in and do the fidelity test on him. I want to do the interview and I want to be like, so do you still think Armageddon's a better movie than Clue? And if he says Armageddon, his head's just going to start exploding. We're going to have to set fire to the Daddy Delos room again.
Yeah, Big D, I don't know if it's about seeing it many times because I didn't see this movie until I was in my 30s. My best friend Victoria had a Clue-themed party in Chicago, and everybody dressed up like Clue characters, and we had a great time. I recall 2 things about that viewing. 1, I was very drunk, and 2, I really enjoyed this movie. And this time I watched it sober, still loved it.
You have a much cooler friend set than I do, Gene, where like people get together and do stuff like that in their 30s. I watched this movie first as a child over the summer with Dad when I was a kid. Summers, I think at the time Dad was living in Tennessee and was on My First Stepmother. But I remember loving it and being addicted to the game afterwards. I remember being blown away at the ending and the absurdist humor and my love for the quick pace, the tete-a-tete dialogue and humor, I think has influenced my own sensibilities when it comes to comedic timing. And this movie was highly underrated. In fact, I had no idea the history of this movie. I thought the theatrical release had those 3 endings. I didn't know that they sent them out with different endings. So that's kind of interesting about it. But this is the kind of movie that I would go to the Alamo Drafthouse to watch.
Of course.
I guess if that makes sense. I'm not real big into Rocky Horror Picture Show, so I've never been to one of those things. But it would be cool to go to like a themed party. Like this is something I could get behind. So,
of course,
please someone invite me to their parties. That being said, Big D, play the trailer.
Every person in this room has the perfect motive.
Stand back!
For murder.
What do you mean? Murder.
But only one of these suspects is the murderer. Is it the timid Mr. Green?
Why are you screaming? Because I'm frightened of what? Screaming!
Or the militant Colonel Mustard?
If I was the killer, I would kill you next.
Huh?
I said F.
Mrs. White, who helped her husband on his way?
Well, it's a matter of life after death. Now that he's dead, I have a life.
Miss Scarlet, who's helped many men along the way?
Practice makes perfect.
Professor Plum, who's looking for a way?
I'm looking.
Mrs. Peacock,
I have absolutely no idea what we're doing here, but I am determined to enjoy myself.
Or did the butler do it?
No. No. No.
Paramount Pictures invites you to an evening of mystery,
Let us in! Let us in! Let us out! Let us out!
murder,
This is getting quite serious.
and madness. In the movie that makes a scene of the crime,
So hold it!
Clue. It's not just a game anymore.
6 strangers are invited to a secluded mansion, met by Wadsworth the butler and Yvette the sexy maid. Each guest is given a pseudonym: Colonel Mustard, Mrs. White, Mrs. Peacock, Mr. Green, Professor Plum, and Miss Scarlet. A 7th guest arrives called Mr. Boddy, whom Wadsworth reveals has been blackmailing the others. Wadsworth explains he gathered everyone to confront Mr. Boddy.
So Hasbro, who owns the rights to Clue, they signed a development deal with Universal where they were going to do a 6-movie partnership. And they said they were going to do Clue, the remake, which is kind of still in limbo, Monopoly, Ouija, Candyland, Battleship, and Magic the Gathering. Some of the projects are still actually in the works. But for me, the only board game adaptation I think I'd be interested in is Risk, Stratego, and for my daughter, a Hungry Hungry Hippos animated movie.
I could see a Hungry Hungry Hippos, like almost like a Hostel type scary movie where 6 college students get abandoned. You know, they get lost down in the Amazon and they have to survive all these Hungry Hungry Hippos.
I'm pretty sure I actually saw Hungry Hungry Hippos on Pornhub like yesterday. It was weird. But anyway, this movie, Big D.
That was Hungry Hungry Humpos.
I've got a lot of great things to say about this movie, but I want to start off with the first thing that I noticed as I was watching it for the cast. Now, again, I've watched it before and just appreciated it as a film, but I was trying to look at it from a critical eye and seeing what they were doing that made this movie special. And one of the things I noticed was the incredibly intelligent use of jump scares in this movie. So the filmmakers anticipated the audience's psychology. They said, okay, people are going to be coming to this movie. They know Clue the game, so they know people are going to die. They know it's a mystery, so they're looking for clues. What can we do to make this fun for the audience? And what they chose to do is include jump scares like every few minutes in the opening when literally nothing dangerous is going on. So it often came out in absurd ways. You had like the doorbell would ring and it would just be loud and sudden. So it would make you kind of jump a little bit. And there's other ones that were even goofier with like the cook whipping around with her knife, like right in Wadsworth's face. Or Colonel Mustard at one point, he's in the library and the door just like opens up and like knocks him out of the way. And I just imagine, again, taking myself back to the 80s when this movie was released in theaters. And it must have been so much fucking fun to be with a big audience in a theater with all these jump scares happening and just laughing every time you were startled.
Well, according to the stats that Big D wrote up here, it appears as if you went to the theater, you would have been by yourself. So maybe
Exactly.
the jump scares
That
would have been
experience wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, they would have been even scarier.
Yeah, but you got to remember in the 80s, like every city had one movie theater. So, and it was only showing one movie. So this was the only choice, at least for a couple weeks.
Right. So have either of you known friends, or grew up in a giant mansion like this? Or ever been to a giant house or slept over at a giant house like this?
I had a friend, Troy, who lived in a 4-story home, if you include the finished basement. So it was 3 stories up. And each floor of it, I believe, was about 3,000 square feet. So
Holy
it was a pretty big house. And so they actually had an intercom system. And it was very often, this is pre-cell phones. It was often the case where you would lose people in the house. You didn't know where somebody was. Somebody left the house you didn't know, or somebody was in a room and you couldn't get a hold of them. It was really weird. And they were a family of 4. And they had this gigantic house. But yeah, it made for a lot of fun.
Would you ever want to live in a house like this? Like, there are times where I think I would want to live in a big, giant compound. But then I think to myself, knowing me, I'm not going to have a family. No one's going to live there with me. I'm going to be there all alone. I'm going to end up wearing tissue boxes for shoes as I walk around my giant Osama bin Laden-like compound out in the desert somewhere and go crazy. But like, I think I want to. Like, I would love to be in one of these classic old school houses or mansions.
See, I think the danger is, Roger, you're a collector. You collect toys,
right.
You collect cars, you collect things. So right now, the size of your home limits the ability for you to become a pack rat.
Right.
If you go into a much larger house,
Yeah.
I'm convinced in 5 years, we're going to have to come dig you out with an intervention and try to get one of these crews in to save you.
It would be a mansion. It would be its own museum. There would be different rooms with different, like I would, after my death, people would charge to see all the oddities I had collected over the years.
I think you're giving yourself a little too much credit there. but for me, like this movie, like I like funny movies. You were equating this to television shows like 30 Rock or The Office. I like The Office. I really love it. But there's something about like stupid slapstick humor that just grates on me. The movie starts off, I'm optimistic. The cast is amazing. It looks beautiful. It's a fun premise. But then in one of the first interactions with Mr. Boddy, he pulls a Three Stooges, goes boink, does the two fingers in the eye, knees somebody in the balls. They have the slapstick sound effects. I'm like, oh, is this what this movie's going to be?
You thought that was Three Stooges. I was like, man, this is like some Reservoir Dogs. Like each one's getting their own code name. Like I thought they were going to do some bullshit where like I remembered, or at least I thought I did, that all the characters' names were just the board name characters. But they're like, no, each of you has a pseudonym. And then I was like, is this where Quentin Tarantino got inspiration from to name all of his characters Mr. Black, Mr. Pink? Was because of the movie Clue?
No, you want a code name. Every heist needs to have code names. You don't want to get pinched by the cops.
Well, regardless of these code names, the screenplay is tight as fuck. The wordplay and the dryness alongside this ensemble cast that has great direction. The hijinks are fun. I thought that they played well into what this movie was trying to be. Like some of my favorite lines going back and forth is when Wadsworth is going around and we're being introduced to these characters. He says, but your husband, he disappeared. And she's like, yeah, that was his job. He was an illusionist, but he never reappeared. Yeah, I never said he was a great illusionist. Like shit like that fast pace, that good timing. This is the kind of movie, this is the kind of humor that I think works now. And maybe it was too early for that 80s audience.
Yeah, I mean, you had those great lines. Even it starts off even in the dining room when Tim Curry is asking you, "What's your role?" "I'm the butler." "What do you do?" "I buttle." It's like it's great. But when it really hits stride for me, like if you have any doubts about this movie as it's starting out, maybe you're like Big D and you're like, it's not really catching me. Get to the point where everyone's in the study for the first time. The jokes come in. It's like a fucking machine gun of comedy, and I couldn't catch my breath. I was laughing the entire time, just the interactions back and forth. And I think to really appreciate this movie, you got to appreciate theater, like stage theater, because people are hitting their marks. Everything's timed perfectly. It was just a joy to watch.
I was going to say, as a thespian, like in doing middle school and high school plays, this is the kind of script you wanted. This is the play you wanted to do.
Well, you may have just saved the movie a half wipe on the score, because that's a good point. If I look at this as theater, I can appreciate what they're doing, because the dialogue, you're right, Roger, it is tight. It is fast. It's well constructed. There are some lines. There's probably only a few that really caught me off guard. Like in the beginning when the car kind of it sputters and stops. Well, why'd the car stop? It's frightened. I didn't expect that. But then there was tons of lines that I just saw coming a mile away. Like, is the little girl's room in the hall? Oui, madame. Oh, no, I just have to powder my nose. I was like, fuck, I shouldn't predict these lines ahead of time. And then, yes, they're fast and furious, but that doesn't mean they're funny and quality. Some of them, I'm like, fucking make it stop. Okay, I'm going to read you one of these quality conversations. Colonel Mustard, Wadsworth, am I right to think that there's nobody in the house? No. Then there's somebody else in the house? Sorry, I said no. I mean yes. No, meaning yes, like there is a straight answer. Is there someone else? Isn't there? Yes or no? No. No, there is, or no, there isn't. Yes. That's the, come on.
What are you talking about? That's one of the most, if I'm a screenwriter, I have one of those. If I'm an average screenwriter, I have one of those in my lifetime.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think Big D, the dimension of that you're missing though, is that we as the audience are like anticipating a clue here. Is there anybody else in the house? And everyone's sitting there like, okay, is there? And you get this, you're frustrated, you're at the edge of your seat, like fucking answer the question. It just keeps going and going. It's what makes it fun. If it's just a straight comedy, if there's no murder mystery involved, then I get it. It's like, oh, this is dumb and it's dragging on. But it's like you're trying to actually find some truth in those lines, and then you realize at the end it's just a throwaway.
It's a modern Who's On.
No, I just took it that Wadsworth was being evasive. I didn't take it as how this is funny. It just made me suspect him more.
This is all for comedic timing and comedic purposes.
And again, maybe the 35th time I watch this with my foam finger, my wrench, my pipe, and my rope, I'm going to love it.
I don't even think foam fingers were one of the original ways you can kill someone in the board game Clue. I think you're just making that up.
Could have been.
That's Clue for kids. Just tickle each other.
Threatening to expose the guests if he is arrested, Mr. Boddy gives them each a weapon, demanding that someone kill Wadsworth. Mr. Boddy turns out the lights. A gunshot rings out, and the lights are turned on to reveal Mr. Boddy apparently is dead. Wadsworth explains that his wife committed suicide due to Mr. Boddy's blackmail and that he had summoned the guests to force a confession out of Mr. Boddy and turn him over to the police. The cook is also found dead, and Mr. Boddy's body disappears but is rediscovered and killed with a candlestick.
So I don't think at any point in the history of this podcast, 150 movies, I have ever complained about a naked body on screen. Never. Male, female, sex scene, anything. I'm all for it. Woo! Bring it on. I'm okay with it. But Gene Lyons, you usually swoop in here and you come to save the day with us and, make sure that everyone's safe and pious and pure. I want to know how the hell someone like yourself who complains about the objectification of women is okay with poor Yvette, every scene that she's in, the camera's zooming in on her tits. They made poor Lesley Ann Warren wear this corset. She couldn't even sit down while filming. So I loved it. I thought she's beautiful. But Gene Lyons, why is it okay for giant breasts to be featured on screen and objectify women as long as it's, for a comedic purpose?
Well, this is congruous with a long-standing tradition of theater. Like, this is cabaret. This is burlesque. This is the whole point of these characters is that they're all reduced to caricature. So look at any of the male counterparts there. You have Professor Plum. He has to be professorial, but like goofy in that way. You have Colonel Mustard. He has to be the uptight military man. Everybody is just a very, very thin character. It's intentional because they're characters that are based on a board game. Like, they're not supposed to be super complex. And that's what makes it wonderful is that they take each of them to the extreme. So Yvette and Miss Scarlet are supposed to be sexy to the point of being absurd. Right. And that's why it's funny.
Okay. Well, just taking mental notes.
Right. Well, and again, I think where this movie shines is its ability to take these characters, these board game card characters, and bring them to life in a way that as humans, we understand the story. And I think the cast and the how well they interplay with each other is really what makes fans of the movie like Gene, myself, and the individuals who loved and go to watch this movie at the Alamo Drafthouse really appreciate.
So I'm going to give a public service warning to the listeners of this podcast. We've done it a few times before. Do not Google Colleen Camp. Do not. She is the actress who plays Yvette.
Jesus, unbelievable.
What? Why are you saying unbelievable? We've talked
now
about
you're
it before.
Objectifying women.
I'm not objectifying her. I'm saying I didn't objectify her. I'm saying that whatever's happened to her in her life has been difficult. Okay. She's turned into the cook character in real life. And that is not about her physical appearance. She likes now giant pearl necklaces, these trendy glasses.
Yeah.
She has a large amount of cats that live with her.
How do you know this?
I don't know. I'm just making it up. I'm just making a generalization.
Exactly.
But do not Google Colleen Camp. That is COLLEENCAMP. Do not do it.
So essentially the lesson here is that a woman who was a sex object in a comedy in the 80s decided to maybe relax a little bit in her life, enjoy herself on her own terms.
Sure.
She gained some weight. She started dressing in a way that Big D doesn't like, and he's going to make fun of her for it.
Exactly.
No, I'm not making fun.
That's
what
what
the
I got away
difference
from
is. You flying on your cape. I'm embracing who I am. I got no problem with it. No problem whatsoever.
That's horrible. She looks like a super nice lady. And by the way, she's been a producer. She's worked a long time. She was married to one of the Goldwins, I believe.
And again, I want to be clear. I'm not talking about her weight. I'm a fat guy. I am not fat shaming her. I'm saying her style change is dramatic.
Her style's like my mom. So
yes, exactly.
I endear people like her because I love my mom.
I want to see pictures of your mom when she looked like a vet. That's what I want to see.
I have.
You want to see his mom dressed as a French maid with her titties
Yes, I do.
My mom was a real smoke show in the 70s. I'll send you some photos.
Oh, fucking pass those on.
Well, regardless of whatever happened to Yvette, the cast overall in the 80s was fantastic. And, a lot of ensemble films, which I love, invariably give the spotlight to like one or two characters. Yeah, they've got 16 big names in them, but it's really one or two people who are the stars of the show. what I really love about Clue is that it gives everyone a chance to shine. 1 minute, I'm thinking Wadsworth's the funniest character. He's showing everybody around the house. He's cracking jokes left and right. And then out of nowhere in the study, Miss Peacock, when she thinks that she's been poisoned, starts shrieking. And I'm loving it. Mr. Green comes over, slaps her in the face. You know, he's coming out of the closet. And you realize that everybody in this movie is going to get a chance to shine. So Big D, I got to ask you, out of all these characters, you got, a dozen to choose from. Was there a single character in this movie that you actually liked or connected with?
Oh, I thought all the characters individually were unique. I thought they were very funny. But what happened was, I think you put them in such a confined space and you made it go at such a frenetic pace that I wasn't able to really connect with them because we only got so little of them. Independently, if you put only a handful of these characters together, I think I probably would have loved it. Or like The Office. If you jump into The Office mid-season 3, the characters are established. You already know who they are. You don't need to catch up. Here, I think if you did a follow-up movie with these characters where you already know who they are, then you just fall back in love with them. But for me, I thought they were all pretty good.
Well, one of the things that I love, to both of your points, is even though I've watched this movie hundreds of times, probably not hundreds, dozens of times, I still get so lost in the movie, even though I've seen it multiple times, that I forget to follow along. Like I get caught up in the pacing, the action. I forget to see if the ending is correctly identified. So Gene, you've seen this movie multiple times. Are you able to remove yourself and actually look for those clues, if you will, to ensure that at the end of the movie, everything actually makes sense?
Oh, what's funny is in most movies that we watch, I'm taking notes on something I observed that was funny or interesting or impressive. And in this movie, I noticed that my notes started to drift off into, I was writing down clues.
Yeah.
I'm like, Yvette was faking the accent and has a co-conspirator, But what's great about that is that, as I said before, as you start paying close attention, every possible hint also becomes a joke. The writers know it's a mystery and that you're going to analyze every word so that they get the opportunity to make you really pay attention to the jokes that they're writing. And the other thing I love is that this film, it knows that it has to explain why the rules of the board game apply. So there's great care in explaining, as you mentioned, Big D, the pseudonyms, but also the setting and even the weapon choices. When you're playing Clue, you're always like, why the fuck would someone kill somebody with a candlestick or, a pipe, like a dagger and a revolver? That kind of makes sense. But here they explained it. Oh, these were all handed to people by Mr. Boddy, and the weapons looked picture perfect. It was another thing I really love. They really made him look like the game. And then, to really put icing on the cake as far as the movie being self-aware, the lines are just blatantly saying it. Like, we're trying to find out who killed him and where and with what. It's the game brought to life. Love it.
I'm liking the movie more and more as we go on. I
like how to watch it with us.
Yeah, possibly. But I don't understand ever why people who are being blackmailed, why they pay. Because it'll never stop. It's never like you pay somebody a couple $100,000 and they go away. Is there anything in your life that somebody could actually blackmail you that you would not go to the authorities?
100%.
Is there anything you could share with us?
No, absolutely not.
No?
There's things I haven't told the two of you.
Oh, man.
That I would have to, which is why the move is either be such a dirtbag that people are like, well, that makes sense that he does that. Or you have to come out and get ahead of it. It's like when David Letterman was like going to be blackmailed because he was sleeping with interns or young people that work for his show. He just came out and was like, this dirtbag is trying to blackmail me. I'm not saying what I did was wrong, but he put the onus on the other person.
Yeah.
Now, we all don't have our own popular late night television shows on network television, so it's difficult for us to do that, but I think that's the move.
Gene's not even answering, so he's got some stuff.
I really don't. I have lent a certain friend of the pod thousands of dollars with which to buy illicit substances so that he could, continue to not be homeless. But other than that, I don't think there's anything I've done that's illegal or strikingly immoral that I'd be willing to pay somebody to keep quiet about.
I just think that's venture capital. You're trying to help a young entrepreneur.
He's investing.
For me, I think you couldn't blackmail me on it, but I would never want Roger and my texts to get out.
Oh,
because out of context, the two of us would probably be in jail. There was no group that we would not offend. Our sexuality would come into question. If somebody saw our last year's thread of text, I would be mortified. I would hide in a cabin in the woods like Ted Kaczynski.
Trying to explain to Kelly our relationship and the jokes that have like 75 layers, like how far they go back, like the understanding of just where we were, the mood that we were having, the fact that we wake up every day trying to out gay each other, like in a super positive way, like
Super
in a
positive.
real, like just.
We can't even go into. We need an hour long.
We can't even explain it. We can't even explain it. But
I
yeah.
can't explain it to myself. No, I just hope my daughter never saw it or my wife.
Well, one thing that the blackmail is over is the idea of socialism. And again, Big D, you live in Florida, which is 90 miles from Key West is to Cuba. And so in Florida, there's a lot of individuals that are still scared of communism, much like my parents. And the word socialism, I think people don't understand, especially our parents' generation. But if you've traveled, if you've been to Europe, if you've gone around the world, you realize that, oh my God, like if everyone kind of pitches in for things that like the government can do better, like trash pickup and policing and fire departments and healthcare and public transportation, suddenly socialism isn't that bad of a word.
Well, regardless of a stance on socialism, I think that the movie does well to actually add this little bit of a political intrigue to it. So, I was wondering, like, why is it set in the 50s? And it's specifically this. You get to include J. Edgar Hoover and these, accusations of socialism. It makes it a lot of fun to kind of take us back into an era where you did have these stigmas. As we get, thankfully, further and further along as a society, those stigmas peel away. But unfortunately, now we have new ones.
Yeah. The weapons are locked in the cupboard. A stranded motorist arrives and is locked in the lounge. While the guests search the mansion in pairs, someone burns the blackmail evidence, unlocks the cupboard, and kills the motorist with the wrench. Discovering a secret passage, Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet find themselves locked in the lounge with the motorist's corpse. Yvette shoots the door open with the revolver. A police officer arrives to use the phone. The mansion receives a call from J. Edgar Hoover, which Wadsworth takes alone. Successfully distracting the cop, the guests resume their search until the electricity is turned off. Yvette, the cop, and a singing telegram girl are all murdered with a rope, lead pipe, and a revolver, respectively.
So at this point in the movie, we've gotten used to a ton of people being in the same room and kind of the hijinks that ensue from that. Then they decide to switch gears. Again, just like you said, Raj, great writing. They pairing up into these search teams, it changes the structure of the film from this ensemble chaos into one-on-one banter. So it allows it to get into some smaller jokes and a little more of what Big D wanted out of it, which is a little better look at these characters individually. I also appreciate that, again, self-aware movie, they address how dumb this idea is. You got a killer on the loose. Why the hell would you split up? If everyone stays in the same spot, you could either find the killer or at least prevent anyone else from dying. But their logic is, of course, well, if someone dies, we'll know the person that they were partnered with was the killer.
Guys, I've always wanted this house. I talked about like how the big mansions, and Alex wrote in and said how the house is actually perfect situated to the board game piece. I've always wanted a house with like these secret passages. Like when I was in Lyon, France, they have these things called traboules, which are like secret passageways in the city, because Lyon is an old Roman city. And that was a way for the underclass to move from house complex to house complex without being seen. It were these traboules. So it's really fascinating. And I've always wanted to live in a house where like I pulled down a head statue and it opened up like a secret door, or I wanted a big painting of George Washington and I could like go through that. Have you guys ever wanted that? Do you guys think about that as a kid growing up?
Oh, of course. We had a room that was underneath the stairs in our attic. Yeah. And my sister and I came up with this whole story about what was in there. And it was a portal to another universe. So yeah, as kids, you enjoy it. I think as adults, yeah, you almost, if anybody's watched Parasite, that's the only fear about having these secret places. You don't know who's going to be down there. But it would be fun to at least create one small room and leave something in there for the next homeowner to find. Like, make it look like there was some sacrifices going on and there's something completely that you didn't do. Paint the wall, just leave it. So like 5 or 6 years later, somebody's like, oh, let's knock down the drywall. And they're like, holy shit.
You know, the secret passages weren't just window dressing in this movie, too. They served a purpose, and it was to really take the movie over the top, right? So we had established that we had a murder mystery. It's a lot of fun, but let's make it even spicier, right? And what the writers introduced to kick the movie up a notch was this additional character, right? So the motorist arrives, and it's a great prank. You already have this like crowded house of characters. There's killing happening in multiple rooms. There's overall chaos. You think as a viewer, you might have pieced it together a little bit, and you're wondering, like, how is the killer not obvious? The killer would have to be running around the house. Clearly, somebody would have seen them. And then you add one more person to the mix, this motorist, and you lock him in a room where nobody has access to the room, and he still ends up getting killed. So that means the killer's got to go like out of his or her way to get that guy. And what makes it great is as the motorist arrives, as the cop arrives, all the guests now, for some reason, are conspiring with each other to keep the whole thing secret, right? And that's the best part, when they're trying to hide it from everybody else. At one point, they're checking all the rooms to make sure that they've got everything hidden. And they look in the study, and it's like 2 corpses, everything's fine. What a great line.
I do like the fact that in the beginning, everyone's like, oh, what are we going to do? This is terrible. And as the murders start to pile up, everyone's like, oh, okay, another murder. They walk in, they find him dead. They're like, okay, geez, what's going on here? But there was one part of the movie that I actually did get a little chuckle and laughed out loud. As the doorbell rings again, of course, they run to it, and we see that it's the singing telegraph girl. She's only in the movie for a couple seconds. Bang, she's shot. It brought a smile to my face. I recognized her immediately. That's the Go-Go's guitarist, Jane Weedland. And it was great. Her first film role. It's brief. She appeared in some other stuff later, but it brought a smile to my face.
Yeah, some other stuff. She was Joan of Arc and Bill and Ted, man.
That's
right. Fox.
The singing telegram gets me every single time, because at this point you're overwhelmed with the amount of deaths, and then like the doorbell rings, they open the door. I'm your singing telegram, and she gets shot and is dead. It's great. The timing is impeccable.
They just leave her body there, so they've hit the point where they're not even trying to bring him inside.
Yeah. But again, with all these dead bodies piling up, the way that the characters have to present that nothing is wrong here is, as they're leading the cop who has now joined the fray, they're leading him to the different rooms. They're doing things like making out with the dead bodies. That's something that no matter the trouble I'm in, if I am about to be caught, would you do that? Would you make out with a dead body?
I mean, that Tom Petty music video for Last Dance with Mary Jane, I was like, yeah, I could see if it was the right corpse. Sure.
I think it depends on how fresh the body is, and also how real the threat is. If you had what was better about that scene is that when they're puppeteering the cook, I think it is, we see from the back that it looks like Mrs. Peacock has her hand through the curtain and she's like pulling her eyelids open.
She is.
So it looks like she's kind of winking. So
I don't know.
You guys are fucking winning me over here. Okay, I'll take another quarter wipe.
Wow. We talked about like this at Weekend at Bernie's, how quickly the human body goes into decomposition. So it doesn't take very long for the body to start to stiffen and all of our color to gray out. So I don't think I could. I guess if I was,
let me put it this way, Rod. Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
Okay, you're having intercourse with someone.
Sure.
They die midway.
Yeah. Do I keep going?
Finish?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, there's your answer.
All right. Like, I mean, I would. It's not like I would go for another 30 minutes. I try to finish as quickly as
knock
possible.
It out. I got to call the coroner. Hold on, let me finish this off.
I got it. But first, let me finish. Come on, don't tell me you've never thought about fucking someone to death.
Who, me? Or are you looking at Gene? Who are you looking at? Not me.
It doesn't matter. I'm just looking at the camera, boys.
No. I'm not capable of that.
Uh-huh. Well, Wadsworth and the others regroup, and he reveals he knows who the murderer is. And an evangelist interrupts the gathering, but Wadsworth continues his explanation. And this is where we start getting into the different endings. So this is ending A. Yvette murdered the cook and Mr. Boddy on orders from Miss Scarlet. Scarlet then killed Yvette and the other victims. Scarlet prepares to shoot Wadsworth, who says there are no more bullets, and disarms Scarlet as law enforcement raids the house. The evangelist, revealed to be a police chief, congratulates Wadsworth, an undercover FBI agent. Wadsworth attempts to demonstrate the revolver was empty, but the remaining bullet brings down the chandelier, narrowly missing Mustard.
In like the weirdest freeze frame of any 80s movie I've ever seen. But you know, what's great about this movie is we've now reached the end. There's 3 endings. And at the end of this movie, I realized I've been laughing for about an hour straight, but still wanted to know, okay, who did it? Like when Wadsworth's explaining it, I'm like, yes, I want to know who did it. Did I figure it out correctly? And that's a really hard trick to pull. They're doing two things at the same time. They're giving us a comedy and a mystery. And if you've been to a murder mystery dinner like I have, it doesn't usually come out very well.
No, I at one time auditioned for one of the murder mysteries in Orlando, Florida.
Is it that Italian place?
No, that's one of them. I did the other one, Sleuths Mystery Dinner.
What is your like batting average when it comes to auditions? Like,
like 10%, like 1 out of 10.
That's not bad.
I take that back. I mean, I got stilt walking like my first time. Like I had never stilt walked before. I was just like, I'm an athlete. I can figure this out. Got up in there, like fucking figured it out, and then lied my way to be in a stilt walker. Yeah. So I mean, but there was this one time when I was heavily auditioning. There was always this one guy that he and I were in every audition together, and he always got the call back, and I inevitably never got the role. So he was like my rival.
He was your casting nemesis.
He was my casting nemesis. He was tall like you. That's why I hate tall people. But like this movie would not be what it is without Tim Curry doing these type of explanations.
No, absolutely not. Raj, this is comedy at my pace. When Tim Curry kicks it into high gear at the end when he's explaining what's going on, they're running between the rooms. The jokes are coming fast and furious. There's these labyrinth twists, and he's just got this energy. And he keeps doing like scary stuff. Like as he's explaining stuff, he'll turn the lights off, and you're like, "Oh fuck, someone else is gonna die." They don't. At one point, he's like even on the ground. You're like, okay, now he's dead. Nope, he pops right back up. But I love the fact that he could have just told us how it ended. No. He had to take us all the way back to the beginning and explain everything in high speed. It's this goofy, spastic comedy. And that type of comedy can be good. I know I've said horrible things about it before as far as like slapstick and yuck, but that goofy spastic energy, unlike Drop Dead Fred, can be good if you keep it smart and you keep it tight.
Yeah, when he's going through these scenarios, you see the brilliancy that was Tim Curry's acting chops. And again, while it is an ensemble movie and everyone is hitting their mark, this would not have been... Like, I don't know if Ryan Reynolds could pull this off. You know what I mean? And he's pretty good.
He's not as debonair, though. Like, he doesn't have
true.
that pizzazz, that flash, that Hollywood about him.
Yeah, that's true. All right, so endings B and C. Ending B, Mrs. Peacock killed all the victims to conceal her taking bribes from foreign powers. She holds the others at gunpoint while escaping to her car, but is caught by the evangelist, who is revealed to be the police chief. Wadsworth reveals he is an undercover FBI agent sent to investigate her. And then finally, ending C. Professor Plum missed Mr. Boddy with the gunshot, but later killed him with the candlestick. Mrs. Peacock stabbed the cook, her former employee. Colonel Mustard bludgeoned the motorist, his driver, during World War II. Mrs. White strangled Yvette out of jealousy and hatred for the latter's affair with her husband. And Miss Scarlet clubbed the cop, whom she was bribing. Wadsworth reveals he shot the singing telegram girl and is the real Mr. Boddy. And Plum accidentally killed his butler. And with the accomplices disposed of, Mr. Boddy plans to continue blackmailing the guests, but Mr. Green kills Mr. Boddy with another gun, revealing he is the true undercover FBI agent, and he's going home to sleep with his wife. End movie.
Okay, so we've touched on it throughout the podcast that there was 3 different endings, that each theater got a different ending. So you never knew which one you were going to get. Only on VHS release, DVD, and then subsequent have they combined all of them. So it's not surprised that this didn't do well, because the movie that maybe someone in New York reviewed isn't the movie that you're going to see in California. So the problem I have with it is that I think by making the plot, you guys say, yes, the script is tight, but the plot was loose enough that there could have been multiple endings. It would have been better for me if they had just come up with one set ending, tightened it up so that we could have tried to figure it out as we went along. And I think that would have been much better, because in the end, when you leave multiple endings, it's as if we just wasted our time, and that how we got to the end and how it ended isn't as important as the story.
Oh, no. This is such a fun idea. Like when I like Raj, didn't realize that there were 3 different endings that were released at 3 different theaters. And that it was a random which ending you were going to get. Oh, my. That makes it so much more fun. That's so much creative.
If they did that today with today's social media and the ability for individuals to communicate, if they did that today, it'd be the most talked about movie.
You're wrong. They already did it. Black Mirror with Bandersnatch. This is like a choose your own adventure. That's what it is.
No. It's different.
No, but it's the multiple endings.
Bandersnatch is, you talk about all the different adventures you could take. This is, which version of the movie did you get? Like, which ending did you get? Like, you would go online and be like, I can't believe fucking Mrs. Green did it. And then another person would be like, what? I just saw it and it was, it was fucking this. And the other person would be like, you're all wrong. They all did it.
Right. But
like, people wouldn't know what to do with themselves.
It's a marketing
gimmick, but it's a movie based on a fucking board game. Of course it's a gimmick.
So do you think all the endings were equal?
No.
So by putting in some less quality, or let's just say some inferior endings in some cities, don't you think they hurt the audience's perception of the movie?
No, in fact, it would be like Avengers, where you'd go and see it again because maybe you get a different ending at a different theater.
Yeah.
Or you could be like the audience that went to see this and not exist. Nobody saw it the first time, let alone multiple times.
Well, that was the gamble that they took, and I think they were just too far ahead of the technology.
How'd that gamble work out for the studio?
It didn't do well because there was no available. When I walked out of the movie, I couldn't go on Facebook and be like, "No, did you guys see Clue? It was badass." Blah 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 blah.
Okay.
Like, of the endings, you raised a good question though. Of the endings, which did you prefer?
The FBI agent one, I'm gonna go sleep with my wife, was my least favorite.
Oh, it was your least favorite. Interesting.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
What about you, Gene?
That was my absolute favorite for a couple of reasons. One is that we really got, again, ensemble cast, everybody got their kill. It was the most absurd, and the absurdity is what makes this movie tick, right? The fact that all this was going on at the same time. And then, of course, I love that final line of, I'm going to go sleep with my wife. It just gave it like the perfect, corny, like cheeseball 50s ending. That it just really worked for me. And there was so much going on in that one. I think with this movie, the more chaotic, the better. And that was the most chaotic ending.
Well, I liked the first ending. I thought the first ending was great. Where Wadsworth was the FBI agent. But did you guys know that there was a fourth ending that was scripted but never shot?
No.
Yeah. So it would have revealed that Wadsworth was the real killer and that he had poisoned the other's champagne. The elderly evangelist, which turns out to be the police chief, would appear once more and wrestle with Wadsworth before the police arrived. And then after telling some of the story to the police, Wadsworth would escape and drive away. He would then hear the German Shepherd growl from the back of the car as the film faded to black. That would have been the fourth.
Yeah, that one I'm glad they they cut. But, another reason that ending C was great is that, everyone got a chance to be hilarious in this movie, but Mrs. White felt sort of flat compared to everyone else. Like, yeah, she's like, killed her husband, cut off his head and his dick, and it's gruesome, but she wasn't like as flamboyant or as endearing as any of the other characters. And then in ending C, you just get these two amazing scenes that made me laugh harder than anything. One is when Tim Curry is running her up the stairs and she can't keep up and he just drops her halfway up the stairs. Fucking hilarious. But there's this awkward moment when she's trying to explain her feelings and she's like, and flames on the side of my face.
It's so good.
You really give her a second to shine, and it just made the movie complete for me.
Do you know that entire monologue was improvised?
Perfect.
The director had said, hey, don't improvise. She went off Madeline Kahn on her own and just did it. And I think it's brilliant because you can see she's making it up and feeling as she goes.
Yeah, it's 100%. But again, this is what makes cult movies. This is why people love these type of movies.
But, Roger, I understand that people love this. There is that group mentality. You have a shared experience. But if you step back and you look at cult films, all the movies have one thing in common. Usually they're bombs. They're failures that take a second viewing for people to say, oh, there is something here that we can fall in love with. But for me, I don't think a movie should need an Alamo Drafthouse giving out props and everybody chanting in unison the lines and singing out loud and turning it into like a theatrical event. That's almost like a way of saving a movie that you think was fun. The movie itself wasn't good enough to stand on its own. So we all need our foam wrenches. We need our Rocky Horror Picture chants and songs. I think there is something to a cult film and why it didn't succeed, because in the end, it just wasn't that good.
But I don't think Roger or I have seen this in that sort of a setting. We watched it like anybody else at home and still enjoyed it. I mean, granted, I saw it at a party.
Time out. I went to a Clue-themed party in costume.
Yeah.
That's Gene Lyons 56 minutes ago.
it still held up when he watched it by himself for the podcast.
I also
That's what
didn't
he's
go to
saying.
Alamo Draft House with a foam finger and props with everyone was instructed to do a thing. We dressed up and watched a movie together and had cocktails. And I think there was probably a drinking game involved too. But look, I agree, Big D. There is a cult film aspect to this. And when this movie started out on this rewatch, Tim Curry seemed like he was still stuck as Dr. Frankenfurter in Rocky Horror Picture Show. There are a lot of parts of this movie that feel a lot like Rocky Horror Picture Show, but it is not fair to compare the two because Clue is 100 times better than Rocky Horror Picture Show. And I'm a person who went to Rocky Horror Picture Show like every Saturday for like 3 years of my life. But this script is leagues beyond what Rocky Horror Picture Show put together. Rocky Horror Picture Show was a sloppily written musical that we laughed at. This is a movie that I laugh along with. It's very, very different.
I agree. You don't have to go, like, I want to go experiences with other people, but you don't need to. This is not a Rocky Horror Picture Show. I feel like I would like Rocky Horror Picture Show or The Room better if I saw it in shared audience, but this is not one of those type of movies.
Gene, I've never seen Rocky Horror Picture Show. Not once.
Well, listen, like, here's the thing is if somebody commissioned that, I would groan. And it's a movie that I've seen a bunch of times, but I would groan at that. Clue is different. It's a movie that's actually smart. Rocky Horror Picture Show is not smart. It's just weird.
Right. Agreed. Well, with that being said, now it's time of the podcast where we break out our Shat meters, give you our wipe scores. If you've never listened to a podcast before, 0 wipes is a perfect movie. 5 wipes is a terrible movie. We'll start with you, Big D. You started off with your text messages today saying this was the worst movie you'd ever seen, including Time Rider, and that you were going to give it a very low Shat score. Has your mind changed at all?
Okay, so I don't want to hear from anybody that I'm not. If anything, I'm flexible. I'm willing to adapt. I would never be like you, Roger, and punitively punish a movie by looking at the other host scores. So I started out, and this was my original review. I was going to say 4 wipes, awful, tedious, a marketing gimmick to sell board games. What you've made me realize is that maybe there's something more to it, that subsequent viewings, as just a movie viewer and not a podcast host, I would enjoy it. So in that spirit, I'm going to go back and keep my word. I'm going to drop it, the half wipe I said in the beginning, I don't remember why, and then the 0.25. So I'm going to give it 3.2 wipes instead of the 4 because the cast is good. The script, I think, might be funny. And I'm going to watch it again and come back. And I think, would you guys give me the right to change it down the road? I know we normally don't do that.
Yeah,
would you guys be open to that?
That's forever an option. We'll always allow it.
So for now, I'm going to go with 3.25 wipes. And that's me being flexible. Please don't hate.
What about you, Gene? How many wipes do you give this movie?
Raj, I haven't had this much fun watching a movie in a long time. Like I really enjoyed Dumb and Dumber. I laughed a lot. We did Cable Guy together. I was in tears. I was laughing so hard. But I'm talking about fun as an overall concept with like the quick pacing, just an overall delight of having my mind exercised here. Literally, when this movie was over, I wanted to call friends over and start the movie all over again and enjoy it with a crowd. It's frantic, it's fast paced, it's memorable, it's silly without being too cutesy, it's political, and it really puts your brain to work like a theatric Sudoku puzzle. I had a great time on this. So for me, this is a half a white movie.
I agree. I love a good murder mystery. Blackmail, intrigue. This is what today's generation of murder mystery comedy films aspire to be. Knives Out is that perfect example of a Clue-like movie done well. If you haven't seen Knives Out, Rian Johnson, this is the type of movie Rian Johnson can do, not Star Wars. And it's thoroughly enjoyable. I believe that Clue is not the best movie that we've done here on the podcast, but it's pretty good. So for that reason, I'm just below Gene, but I'm far above Big D. It is a 1 wipe for me. So if we were to add up all of our scores and divide by 3, that gives you the overall Shat ranking, which is what, Gene?
Raj, the average Shat score for Clue is 1.583 repeating wipes on the Shat scale.
And Big D, if we were to take that score and compare it to all the movies we've done here at the podcast, where does it rank in the pantheon of Shat?
That now places Clue alone in the 51 spot. It is slightly better than Gremlins, Spaceballs, The Natural, and The Rock, and slightly worse than Scarface, UHF, Magnolia, and Galaxy Quest.
We really should have pushed you harder on Spaceballs, man. We could have convinced you.
Yeah, Spaceballs is great. All right, I mean, that's fair. It's a fair ranking. Now it's time for the podcast where we break out our shout-outs and read our voicemails. You can call in with your shout-out to 914-719-SHAT. But Gene, what is a shout-out?
Raj, a shout-out is our way of saying thank you for visiting our website, shatthemovies.com, where you can see past movies that we've done, vote on future movies, and support the podcast at shatthemovies.com/support. And if you'd like to hear your name on the podcast, just go to shatthemovies.com/shoutout. This week, we have one very special shout out. It goes to listener John S., who's writing in about our coverage of Air Force One. John S. says, I agree that while it doesn't make sense for President Marshall to not kill the first bad guy, it's important for storytelling purposes. Marshall progresses from somewhat reluctantly involved to full-blown get off my plane, ass-kicking POTUS. As the audience, we must see him go through a progression. It's identical to what happened in Die Hard. McClane's first kill is accidental, killed by breaking the bad guy's neck after rolling down the stairs. There's a progression that we as the audience need to go through so we get drawn into the action and we're not rooting for a monster from the start. Thanks so much for writing in, John S., and thanks for commissioning this episode of Shat the Movies.
I'm going to agree with him there. You know, as a movie viewer, we know the stakes. We're like, oh, fuck, Gary Oldman, he means business. He's going to fucking kill your whole family. So we want to escalate from not being violent to just over the edge, killing him with our bare hands. So it's good that John brought us back a bit and said, hey, you got to think, what would you do in this situation realistically? And I don't think that we would all jump to murder immediately.
I'm sorry, Big D. If people open fire with automatic weapons aboard an aircraft and kill a bunch of people I knew, it's fucking on like Donkey Kong, baby.
Yeah.
Okay, you see, you swayed me back. I'm agreeing. Fucking kill him right away. You're right, Gene. You're right. Fuck you, John S. You should have killed him right away. But thank you very much for sponsoring this episode of Shat Movies.
Big D, what's the next movie we're doing on the podcast? We're doing lots of movies in succession. Like we're doing like 3 or 4 recordings a week just to get ahead of the schedule for Westworld. But what's our next one?
So next one, this is a movie that has made me cry multiple times. I've watched it on multiple continents. It's a masterpiece. It's one of the best films of all time. And we want to thank John Yu for commissioning a film that tells the tale of Captain John Miller taking his men behind enemy lines to find Private James Ryan, whose 3 brothers have been killed in combat. Surrounded by the brutal realities of war while searching for Ryan, each man embarks upon a personal journey and discovers their own strengths to triumph over an uncertain future with honor, decency, and courage. This came out July 24th of 1998, directed by Steven Spielberg. And for me, it is one of the few movies that I have trouble getting through without becoming emotional. So thank you very much for the commission, and I look forward to watching this one again.
Yeah, it's like the Clue of war movies.
Very similar movies, yeah.
Yep. Well, that does it for this week's episode of Shat the Movies. If you want to hear what movie we're doing next, just wait to the end of the movie and we'll play the trailer. Thanks, Miguel and John, for commissioning a Clue. It was a pleasure to watch, and we hope you enjoyed our score. That concludes this week's episode of Shat the Movies. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're everywhere, including Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also email us at hosts@shatthemovies.com. You can support the podcast by shopping our Amazon affiliate link, completing a free anonymous survey so we can sell it to advertisers. You could buy our merchandise or by commissioning your own movie. Find all the information by visiting our website, shatthemovies.com. Also, check out our sister podcast, Shat on TV, where we review television series such as Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, Game of Thrones, True Detective, and Watchmen. Find all the information on our website, shatontv.com, where everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. Be sure to subscribe. And if you stop by iTunes, please be sure to leave a 5-star review. That does help the podcast grow. You can also, post that like on your Twitter and Snapchat. It'll be really fun. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Dick Hebert, and Gene Wadsworth-Lyons, I'm Roger Roper. Be sure to join us next week for the following movie review. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, good night, and good luck.
You see, when you end up killing one of your men, you tell yourself it happened so you could save the lives of 2 or 3 or 10 others, maybe 100 others.
afternoon their mother's going to be getting all 3 telegrams. That's not all. There's a 4th brother, the youngest. He parachuted in with the 101st Airborne right before the invasion. He's somewhere in Normandy. We don't know where. Is he alive? We don't know.
Some private in the 101st lost 3 brothers and he's got a ticket home. You and I are taking a squad over to Newville on a public relations mission.
Over my way, thank you, sir. This entire mission is a serious misallocation of valuable military resources.
I mean, where's the sense of risking the lives of the 8 of us to save one guy? I swear, I hope Mama Ryan's real fucking happy knowing that little Jimmy's life is a little bit more important than 2 of our guys.
I don't know anything about Ryan. I don't care. Man means nothing to me. It's just a name. But if finding him so he can go home, if that brings me the right to get back to my wife, well then, that's my mission.
It doesn't make any sense, sir. Why? Why do I deserve to go? Why not any of these guys? They all fought just as hard as me.
Is that what they're supposed to tell your mother?
Tell her that when you found me, I was here, and I was with the only brothers that I have left. And that there's no way I was going to desert them.
What do you think?
You don't want to know what I think. What if by some miracle we stay and actually make it out of here? Someday we might look back on this and decide that Saving Private Ryan was the one decent thing we were able to pull out of this whole god-awful shitty mess. That's what I was thinking, sir. Like you said, Captain. We do that, we all earn the right to go home.